Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We thank Him, we praise Him, we glorify Him, beseech Him to send His choicest salutations upon His most beloved, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, and upon all those who choose to tread in His path until the last day. So, if you didn't get into it in too much detail, one of the things we try to get people to do is to just connect with the people sitting around them. We're big on community here. But also for us to utilize the opportunity in a reflective state of spiritual exercise like fasting to get our minds going and to try to be aware as we're immersed in the practice of what it's actually doing to us. And so whether you actually talked about it or not, how has it been so far for people in terms of their fast of today? Clearly some of you look a little more tired than some of the others. But what has it been like for people today in comparison to other fasts that you might have done, or even just individually? How does it create anticipation for tomorrow, which is the fast that this day of fasting gets linked to? And if you didn't fast today, there's going to be insight that people can offer to you for today in comparison to what you might then anticipate if you're joining tomorrow's fast with the fast on Saturday. And just to clarify for people, the main fast is the 10th of Muharram, which is tomorrow, the day of Ashura. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he finds people fasting on this day, he says in the coming year, if he was to still be in this world, he would adjoin the 10th day with the day before, the day after was a recommendation to differentiate. If you fast only the 10th, that's also fine to do. If you're able to pair it with the day before, which is today, or the day after, then that's a good thing to do as well. But how is it for people today, for those who are fasting? What has it been like for you experientially? Yeah, go for it.
Doing well.
It's going well?
It's going well. Feel good. It just leads me to better fast in the future.
How does it do that?
I would say my anticipation to, say, not eat or not crave as much, not wanting to follow the urges as much, has gotten a lot better.
Okay, great. What else? How's it going for others? You can be honest, right? It's hard to say that it's hard, right? In our tradition, there's more ajr in doing something that has not like fluidity to it. You know, the person who reads the Quran with ease in comparison to the one who struggles with the recitation, the one who's struggling with the recitation, they have more reward in it than the one who could read it with fluidity, for example. Each one of us is distinct. It doesn't mean that we're traveling in solitude that yields loneliness. But when we say, ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, guide us on the straight path, a sirat is not like a tight, narrow pathway, but it's a very expansive pathway. That you're still traversing your own journey, but there's room for many people to be walking it with you. It's not better or worse, but just so we can gain from each other's insights. So how has it been for others fasting today? What did you say?
Very long.
And what is it that makes it feel long?
The heat. Not having my coffee in the morning.
And what do you take from this?
I guess the only thing that comes to mind is how at the end when we break the fast, I won't be that hungry and only one cup of water will be enough to just get rid of this whole exhaustion. So it shows how short it is when you struggle with.
Yeah, there's a lot that's going on there, right? Awareness of what the impact is and the deprivation of certain substances in the course of our day, the recognition and anticipation of just how good that water is going to taste when you break your fast on it, and the whole idea that you have to go through a mode of abandonment sometimes to be able to find gratitude in something that quite often you engage in on a day-to-day basis. So right now, if you were to think, how great would a cold glass of water taste? But when was the last time in the last week that you really thought about it in that way? And the verse is applicable, right? يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That, O you who have faith, fasting has been written for you as it was for those who came before you, so that you might attain taqwa. The mandate of Ramadan derived from this verse, and the fasting and obligation is there, but the principle is still there. As an act, it's meant to inculcate wakefulness. And most of us walk around in a place where we're just on default settings. So the notion isn't to be conscious of how good the water tastes, but to actually be conscious of your ability to be conscious of things. And to see how it's a necessary act sometimes that's not about the abandonment of food and drink, but the nourishing of other parts of ourselves that quite often just get left behind in the day-to-day routines that don't necessitate so much presence, right? So a glass of water, it's gonna still do the same thing as the water that you would have drank yesterday when you weren't fasting, but you're thinking about it differently. What else are people feeling or experiencing right now? I can't see anything with the sun coming up. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, compared to back home in Scotland, where it's so much easier and cooler when you're fasting in weather like this, I feel like a hot potato. And I think when in weather like this, you gain more patience and endurance to adapt to fasting and under more difficult conditions. And again, I feel like that's what affects them a lot, to see how more willing you can like turn towards and more during the day, and especially when you're not doing it during Ramadan where you build up that obedience, but when you're doing it just 1 or 2 days, it kind of hits you and you need to realize there are a lot of things that you take for granted day to day.
Giving you an insight to your capacity, allowing for you to see like what you're really made of, but also an ability to see that some of the things that we need, we don't fundamentally need them in the ways that we need them, right? Because when Maghrib hits, a lot of you are going to want something to drink because it's so hot outside. You're not going to think about like excessive eating or a particular restaurant or any of those things that quite often get commercialized, but it's just going to be about, let me quench this thirst in a certain way and recognize that I have a fragility that needs to sometimes understand that just because I have something doesn't mean that I deserve it. And just because I want it doesn't mean that I need it. And seasonally, we have these days that are given to us not as obligations, but as recommendations. And as recommendations, they have the capacity now to inculcate, not in the midst of it, but at the completion of it, the only thing that can come when you do something that you're not obligated to do, but you're just doing it because you want to do it. That's where love comes in. That's where positivity comes in. How about for anybody else? How's it been so far? Any other insights? Any other thoughts? What's it been like today on this 9th day of Muharram? Yeah.
So for me, I feel like on a day-to-day, it feels like you need a lot to be happy sometimes. And today I feel like just a glass of water would make me the happiest person in the world. So going back to what you said about how just the smallest thing, it's not about the big thing. Sometimes the smallest thing can bring you so much joy.
What do you do to retain this tomorrow? Or next Thursday when there's Sunnah fast to fast on Thursday, but you don't have to do it. Like next Wednesday, what are you going to do so that that consciousness and mindfulness is still there? That allows for that sense of wakefulness, right? The Prophet ﷺ, even when he's asleep, he describes himself as being in a state of wakefulness. تَنَامَ عَيْنَايَ وَلَا يَنَامَ قَلْبِي. My eyes, they sleep, but my heart does not sleep. The opportunity to have presence that is able to recognize, even in like a simple sip of water, there's room for us to be able to find something that's not inescapable, but just real joy and contentment, that alhamdulillah, I have this water to drink. I have this thing to quench my thirst on. And to let that be a prism through which I have a vision modifier of other difficulties and challenges that are in my life. I want you to think about this now in relation to the hadith that becomes the basis of this fast of Muharram. We have hadith that say in Muharram, the Prophet ﷺ would fast more in Muharram than any other month outside of Ramadan. And that Muharram itself is described as being a month of Allah. There's a lot of sanctity to it, a lot of hurmah to it. To have something that's constructed with this frame of being of God, a book of God, a messenger of God, a house of God, it gives a unique distinction and elevated status to the thing that you're discussing. And so a month of God that Muharram is being described as, and it's described as one of the 4 sacred months on the Islamic calendar, a month in which the Prophet ﷺ fasted more than anything else. And the 10th of Muharram, which is tomorrow, he's described as fasting more avidly than most other fasts that he would fast. There's one hadith that associates this with prayer at night, voluntary qiyam, charity being done. But a key hadith in all of this is one where the Prophet finds people in Medina. In our tradition, the Prophet was already fasting on the 10th of Muharram in Mecca. But he comes to Medina and he finds some Jewish tribes fasting, and he says, "Why are you fasting on this day?" And they say that this is the day that Moses, the children of Israel, they are free from the tyranny of Pharaoh. The oppressed, they have their liberation from the oppressor. In some narrations, it includes the idea of Fir'aun being drowned on this day. But they say this is a good day. This is the day that those who are held down, they are emancipated. And so they fast on this day. And the hadith, it continues where the Prophet says, we have more right to Musa alayhi salam, Moses, than you do. We're going to fast on this day too. And then he distinguishes it, saying that fast the day before, fast the day after, in order to make it unique in comparison to those who are fasting from another tradition. Why are they fasting in relation to the commemoration of these oppressed peoples being freed from oppression? What's the link between fasting and that experience? Do you get the question? Why is that something that they are doing? Why did Musa alayhi salam fast as a result of this? His people who were enslaved are now emancipated, and his decision is, let's fast to commemorate this. Why? What's the link there? Do you understand the question? If you can turn to the person next to you and just talk about it. Why do you think this is the act that they were compelled towards in response to this momentous occasion? Anything they could have done, they chose to fast in response to it. Why is that their reaction? And just again, if people want to, feel free. You can move up if you're sitting in the back of the room, just so we're able to kind of speak a little bit more to each other and kind of see everyone in the room, but you don't have to. But find somebody to talk to. Don't be sitting by yourself, and talk this out, right? If you haven't been here before in one of our halaqas, you don't want to only speak if you feel like you're saying the right thing. Nor do you want to avoid speaking because you're worried that you're going to say the wrong thing. The way that we can engage in deepening in our perspective is being able to listen to each other. And at this juncture in your life, whether you were born into Islam, you converted into Islam, you are quote-unquote very religious or not, we're at a place, aside from the youngest person in the room, who's pretty small, mashallah, but the rest of us are not of that age demographic. We have now the mental capacity. We have the unique tools that have been developed organically or deliberately that give us the ability to think. You don't want to shy away from it for reasons that don't make sense. And if you're the one that's being spoken to, just listen. Don't listen to try to respond, but just to understand. Because some people in this room who are going to talk, they've never spoken about what something religious means to them before. They've never been in a place where somebody has said, tell me what you think about this. It can be very daunting when you're now sitting with somebody and you are worried about how they will respond, and the person validates your fears by being an idiot in how they respond. And saying, here's every reason as to why what you said makes no sense. You don't want to respond that way. Just let somebody share with you their insights. Why do you think that this is how they respond to the Exodus, the emancipation, as an oppressed people being set free from oppression? The oppressor is no longer able to be tyrannical. Why is this the response of these people at that time? Why are we being encouraged? The Prophet ﷺ telling his people, we're going to commemorate it too. And you and I, 14 centuries later, what is the link between fasting and this momentous occasion? Why is this a sensible act in response to it? If you can turn to the person next to you and talk it out, ideally in pairs, but try to be no more than 3 so everyone can talk and listen, and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Okay, so what are some of the things that we're coming up with? Why do you think this is how these people responded? Right, they're an enslaved population. Not for a day, not for a week, but this is going on for a long time. And to juxtapose it to some of the comments that we had in the beginning of today, which is not to put it in conflict with each other, but to just think out. We're sitting in an air-conditioned room with pretty nice view on this side. We got a nice view in our prayer room downstairs. We're walking around in trains and buses and whatever else. And it's not easy to fast in the heat. These people just walked across a desert after a sea was parted around them, after being enslaved. And after all of that, to celebrate, they said, hey, let's fast. Why? What's the connection between fasting and what it is that they're going through in that moment? What did you talk about? Do you want her to talk? Is that what you're poking her? Yeah. What did you say?
So I was saying that, like, when you're at your best, everything, like, all the rights are being taken away, like, food, your shelter, your house, but then when you're not, and you choose to be, like, outside of that, and you want to learn Allah that you're choosing to deprive yourself from these things for the sake of Allah, instead of you're just saying to something else. And, like, as a form of thanks, doing fasting is a form of like, that's never that one thing to find Allah for that.
Okay, great. How? How is it a form of thanks if we were to flesh it out more? Like you're walking through Washington Square Park and somebody talks to you and says, here's this free halal meal for you, Muslim woman. And you say, no, I'm fasting today. And they say, why are you fasting? Because the children of Israel fasted on the day that they were emancipated from the tyranny of Pharaoh, and we're commemorating that act of gratitude. And they say, how is that an act of gratitude? What? You don't have to say it to respond to them, but so that you can build a relationship with it. How is it an act of thankfulness? Do you get what I mean? Do you want to shift paradigms a bit sometimes, right? This is the challenge in an Adamic story of creation. When Iblis does not prostrate to Adam, and everything else prostrates to Adam, and I am of fire, and he is of dirt, and why would I do this? What he's interjecting into the world is an act of arrogance, an act of racism, an act of flawed logic, but it's also skewed perspective. He's lacking perception that has him see what everyone else sees, but sees it differently. What are these people seeing in that moment that then brings them to fasting? Do you get what I mean? What did you talk about? How, and we can build on this or whatever else you discussed. What else did you discuss when you were talking about this? Yeah.
We had a nice discussion, us three, and I quoted what you said a little while back, that from an Islamic perspective, fasting might be looked at as a deprivation of your stomach, but it's really a fulfillment of your heart. So it's the highest form of thanks to Allah when you fast. Like when you give up what you love in the name of Allah, you live up to the name of what Islam is, which is submission.
Yeah, amazing. I don't need food right now. I have Allah. Ibrahim alayhi salam gets catapulted into the fire. The angel comes to help him. And Allah commands the flames to be cool. And the angel says, what would you have me do for you? He says, are you my God? And the angel says, no. Then I don't need you. I have no use for you. Where's the connection between fasting and that awakefulness, that consciousness that renders gratitude? What else did you talk about? Yeah.
So one thing that we learned is that fasting is unique, and that Allah has said that I determine what the reward for fasting is, right? That when you're fasting, okay, you know, all of there's some acts in Islam right, that are predefined in their reward, right? We pray, we give charity, we go on, all that. But Allah said that in fasting, I determine what the reward is for that. So when we're fasting in Ramadan, when we're fasting the day of the Hijjah, or all the other Sunni fasts, we don't know what that reward is, but we know that our Lord has said that He determined what the reward is. So it's a recognition in that we're doing this, giving something up that we can have, but we choose not to have, and knowing that in that relationship, that submissive relationship to Allah, that we recognize that Allah is our Lord, and He will reward us for our acts of devotion.
Great. Other thoughts? What's the connection? Why would these people fast on this day? Right? You have something good going on in your world, and it's like, man, this was great. I'm going to fast now, right? Do you think that way? But what's getting them to think that way? Yeah, go ahead.
You're saying how through all these things that happened on this day, you're discussing some of the other events, they were relying upon Allah for their victory, for it to happen. And kind of similarly, the way I was looking at it was we're relying upon Allah to even just get through our fast, and kind of giving up our food, it kind of puts you in touch with your own humanity and your own reliance upon who provides you with the food and the strength you have just to get through your day. So it kind of recenters you in seeing like you relied upon Allah for our victory, and you rely upon Allah for everything you have, what you're giving up in the fast.
Musa alayhi salam fasts on this day. Nuh alayhi salam fasts on this day. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam fasts on this day. You're part of an entire community that is now leaving behind your oppressor. You have an opportunity as literally miraculous things are happening around you. Can you imagine what it would be like to be in a group of people and there's a person in front of you that they have been given the mu'jiza, the miracle of making the sea part in front of your eyes? You've left now behind everything that has held you back on a physical sense. The psychological aspects to it, these are still people that are wired the way that we're built with. I've been in refugee camps. I've been in conflict zones. I've seen people that have PTSD as a result of living under genocide and ethnic cleansing. May Allah make things easy for them. The individuals who are giving them now the standard of what to be in response to this situation. That all of that we are now emancipated from, Moses is still the teacher of his people. And at the end of this tyranny, hey, let's fast. What's he seeking to bring them towards? What is he giving them as a consistent practice? And you got to think about this, reflect upon it, contemplate. Because you know the way that things worked back in the day, right? We have Surat al-Fil that's associated with the year of the elephant, Am al-Fil, which is the year that commemorates for us momentous births of people who are the best of creation in our tradition, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These people are not going to forget the day that this happened. This is what they do in the Jewish community on Yom Kippur. It stays with them in that way. And every single time they celebrate this emancipation, they're not celebrating it with a feeding of the stomach or a feeding of the self. They're celebrating with a feeding of the soul. And the person who is leading them understands in the moment and what lies ahead is something that is not just about let's let loose for a little bit, but this is going to be something that sticks with people, that demographics all over. There are 2 billion of us in the world. The Sunni community makes up 90%. There's a lot of Muslims who today, tomorrow, and Saturday, they're going to be fasting. And whether they're aware of why they're fasting or not, every person who is designated to be a teacher of their people in relation to how you engage in the aftermath of this and the recognition of it, this is a moment where you don't want to feed your stomach, you want to feed your heart. You want awareness and consciousness to be something that's ever present. To recognize what it is that we're actually celebrating in this moment is the victory of the oppressed over the oppressor. That Allah is always with the oppressed, never with the oppressor. And the way that you engage in a celebration of the oppressed being freed from their oppression is to not indulge in dunya, but to recognize that your celestial self is bigger than anything that the dunya can offer to you. And then you have everything that you said in the moments that we started this conversation with. لِلصَّائِمِ فَرْحَتَانِ فَرْحَةٌ عِنْدَ إِفْطَارِهِ وَفَرْحَةٌ عِنْدَ لِقَاءِ رَبِّهِ. That for the fasting person, there's 2 farhas, 2 joys. There's a joy when they break their fast. It's going to feel good to drink that water. You better say alhamdulillah so that you're drinking it from your heart as well as from your mouth. وَفَرْحَةٌ عِنْدَ لِقَاءِ رَبِّهِ. And there's a joy when they meet their Lord. Why? Because as-sawmu li is what the hadith teaches us. Allah says that fasting is for me. And the joy is still rooted that even in the most difficult of moments, you have a sense of dignity, an elevated sense of ethics and consciousness, that all of this is still within our understanding that we have a God that's not just watching us, but watching over us. You move forward now, centuries from that moment. And you go into the 61st year after Hijrah, where the grandson of the Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hussein ibn Ali, radiallahu anhuma, may Allah be pleased with both of them, stands on the plain of Karbala. There's a tyrannical individual in front of him. An army that is now rooted in a dynastic movement that is newly formed as a mode of governance within the Muslim experience for the first time ever. And the individual who's standing on the 10th day, which is tomorrow for us, Maghrib sets upon us and we go into that. Our Shia brothers and sisters who have been gathering every night for the last 9 days in our musalla and will continue into Saturday night with a main program tomorrow morning to commemorate the martyrdom of Hussein radiallahu anhu. It's still attached to this notion of how do we relate with consciousness to what this world is all about. What does it mean to be a Muslim, not in name, but in reality? How do we find dignity, a sense of nobleness, in the standing of Hussein in Karbala, in the face of everything that are odds against him, but recognizing that those that transgressed against the grandson of the messenger of God are never remembered as being anything other than of the most terrible in terms of potential. And Hussein radiallahu anh is elevated and ennobled that much more through his act of witnessing to something that is much bigger than just what the world can offer to him. Fasting as a practice enables us to be able to potentially have that kind of consciousness. That when you're making this decision, you have this sense of awareness. It's not that fear dictates and defines why I do what I do, but I overcome the fear. I meet it with a courage that's not the absence of fear, but the ability to face fear and recognize what it is that I want to get to. For some of us, we're exhausted, not because fasting is hard, but because we don't do it enough. And you might say to me, after today and tomorrow, I'm not fasting in the middle of the summer ever again. And I would say, if you just tried it, you would learn things about yourself that you didn't even realize. If tomorrow is the 10th, we have the Sunnah fast of the middle days of the month, the 13th, 14th, and 15th of the month. So if Friday is the 10th, Saturday is the 11th, Sunday is the 12th, then Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, these are recommended days to fast also. There's a recommended fast of Mondays and Thursdays, twice a week. But you have to want it. You have to want to actually be somebody who every sip of water is something that you drink with consciousness and gratitude. You have to want to have that kind of presence. When you're putting a morsel of food in your mouth, you want to have that kind of presence. That when you walk into a room, you're willing to acknowledge everybody, not just those who match you in skin color, race, and class. Not just those that you grow up seeing their faces that look just like yours across the dinner table, but with wakefulness and mindfulness, you connect at the level of hearts and souls, not just bodies. If all you do is feed your body, it's going to be hard to connect then beyond bodies. You have to want to walk on the street, and when you see somebody who lives on the street in the middle of blazing heat, that you don't feel as if you are somehow better than they are just because you have a roof over your head. Because just because you have it doesn't mean you did something to deserve it. All of these things get wrapped up in fasting. And so if you're exhausted today, good. You exhausted yourself for a good reason. Tomorrow, you're going to get up and do it again. Some of you who have been Muslim for more than a few years, you fasted in this heat when Ramadan was at this time of the year some years ago. Don't forget who you were. And if you want to think every single moment in these ways, because this is what the companions did. They longed for the long winter nights so that they could pray more to Allah, to fast in the long summer days because the fast was that much more impactful in these days. Why? Because when it's like 60 degrees outside, man, and Maghrib's at 4:30 in the afternoon, you're not going to feel the thirst the way you're feeling it now. And sometimes when you go to all of your limits, it allows for you to think about gratitude and appreciation and ni'mah in a different way. Musa alayhi salam is telling his people, even after all of this, we still have something to be grateful for. We still have autonomy to be able to choose how it is that we are going to commemorate and celebrate. So let's not forget that our response will be rooted in a truly Tawheed-driven, monotheistic response to this oppression that we faced. And we lived in ways that nobody else can really imagine, where our hunger was involuntary. So now let's, on our own terms, be voluntary in it. Let's show that we are still in control of ourselves, even in every single way, that the one that just drowned behind us was one that's stuck in the dunya. We remember who our teachers are, alayhimus salam. So don't let it be the last time you fast. You got through a hot, heavy day. Why would you not fast in October and November? Why would you not fast in December and January? Why would you not make it a regular part of your spiritual diet? That you're not just feeding the stomach, but you're nourishing the heart. Do you get what I mean? Most of you right now, myself included, are in a place where you might not realize how you're absorbing it, but it's going to make sense a week from now. After you break your fast, you eat in a gathering that the angels are descending in. You're in a place where the barakah of the moment starts to come. Your willingness to give in to your own vulnerability around what it is that necessitates your reliance on something greater to just be. You'll be able to overcome certain things that say, it's not for anybody else. I can do this on a regular basis. I can start small, 1 day a week, a couple of days a month. I can allow for myself to dive back in so that when the dunya seeps in again and again and again, I'm able to disconnect through spiritual exercise that helps me reorient the consciousness. So a week from now, if I start to realize what I realized on the day after Ramadan, that it was weird to eat on the morning of Eid, and I didn't know if I should put something in my mouth. But after a month passed, I haven't thought about that for a minute. And now, I'm kind of where I was in those first couple of days of Ramadan again. If I want to get to a place of elevated consciousness, I can either choose to abandon the practice that's teaching me something, or I can say, I'm Muslim, I'm going to do it a little bit differently. Does that make sense? Do you get what I'm saying? What I'd like you to do is turn to the person next to you and just talk this out. What are you taking away from this so far? What is it bringing up for you? What is it inculcating in terms of your thought process? And then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Okay, so let's hear from some people. What are you talking about? What did we discuss? What are some of the things we're taking away so far? What did you guys talk about, since you wanted extra time to talk? Can I give you the mic? Can I give you the microphone? I just can't hear you. Can you use this? Can you pass it?
We were just pondering off of what we spoken before about fasting. Is this working? What we spoken before about fasting, I was just explaining how there's people who, they fast for a certain reward, and how they fast, for the heart, for that deepening. And we're just, we're going off about is on how, where you exercise, that motive, where you exercise all that energy to. And then how you structure that, how you set yourself up to it. Because you don't want to, put a blame on yourself for not having the ability to do certain religious acts, because you are still growing, and growth is a part of this team. Perfection is your enemy. Perfection is haram. Excellence is the name of the game. So you have to make sure you go by feeling yourself and really having that conversation, as you mentioned about the psychological, really making sure that while you are also contemplating on Allah, you're making dhikrullah, you're also looking at your nafs and seeing how you're pacing yourself and how all of this contributes to the divine and so on.
Yeah, amazing. mashallah, right? Like at the end of all this, we're emancipated. We didn't emancipate ourselves to go from servitude of one thing to servitude of another. Because even where these oppressors sought to captivate our bodies, we were always in submission of the divine. So we're not going to move from being in a place where in captivity our submission was to the divine to now being liberated and becoming submitted to the captivity of the dunya. You see? And so I'm in this space. The Prophet makes dua, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-'ajzi wal-kasal, that, oh Allah, I seek your protection from inability and laziness. But it's not inability in the sense that I'm not fundamentally capable of doing something, right? I can't build an iPad. I don't know how to do that. I can't dunk a basketball. I know you're very surprised that I can't dunk a basketball, but I can't dunk a basketball. There's not that kind of inability. The inability that this word is saying, ajaz, is that I have the capacity to do it, but I still don't do it. And so there's a distinction there. If you can't do something, my daughter, she's 10 years old, mashallah, Medina, many of you have met her, make dua for her. She's an amazing blessing in my life. Probably the greatest thing that my name has ever been attached to. And she really wants to fast. She's got a cold and she can't fast. I said, you're sick, don't fast. But she wants to fast. We're going back and forth and why can't I fast? And my wife said fast on Saturday. And she's like, Saturday is not the day we're supposed to fast. We're supposed to fast tomorrow. And I said, baby, Allah rewards you for your intention when you really want it. Not just like pretend want it, but when you really want it. Allah gives you the ajr for the niyyah when you can't do what you really want to do, right? That's not the kind of inability we're talking about. It's that you have the capacity. If you didn't run for your whole last 5 years of your life, right? Like during COVID, I got pretty big. Not like in a healthy way, in an unhealthy way. My children and I were sitting in our apartment for many weeks, like many of you probably were. And one day we got onto a scale that my wife decided to bring home. And I stood on the scale, and I didn't even know that that number was something that could be associated with me. So my immediate reaction was to say to my wife, Priya, I think the scale you got is broken. And then my children got on the scale, and they said, no, Baba, it's fine. And I said, shut up, you dumb kids. And then I got into a gym and ran on a treadmill. And I used to work out 3 times a day when I was in high school. I was supposed to play in college, sports. I'm not going to tell you different things that at that point I could do physically. I got on this thing and I couldn't run longer than 6 minutes. But now I wake up every morning. I run for an hour every day. I work out for more after that, lift weights. I get from one place to another, but I can't take the first time I did it as being the standard of what would come down the line. You can't let how you responded to your first fast in a hot day be what sets the standard of just like a physical exercise that you didn't do for a while is going to be strenuous. I'm not going to hate on myself and say, I can't get back on this thing. But I'm working towards something. And so spiritual exercise is not that different. It's hard to sit and have the patience to read Quran. But if you can't read a page, you still read a verse. And then you build yourself up. Why would you stop the exercising after you just did it once and you felt the experience? A lot of you, you're going to drink water at Maghrib time. It's going to taste great. You're going to eat the dates that we gave to you, and it's going to taste sweeter than anything you've ever tasted in your life. Why would you want to lose that consciousness? Why would you want to let it go without like a fight? Do you get what I mean? What else are we taking away so far? What did you discuss in your groups? I heard a lot of people talking. So I know people are saying something. Yeah.
It takes you away
And then what happens when you do that?
You become more connected with Allah.
And then what? Does that feel bad?
No, I think for me it feels good.
Great.
And I'll spend more time reading and learning other things that I was not aware about. So it deepens not only my relationship with Allah, but my own spirituality as well.
And are any of those bad things? It's okay if they are, you can say it, right? Everybody really likes your accent, so we won't mind. But thinking about this now, subjectively speaking, sister's saying it's not bad, and I'm not saying she should or should not do, but some of you likely have similar outcomes. You have to think about it in order to name it as you're experiencing it so that it doesn't become fleeting and lost in the moment where now you're not feeding your celestial self at the time of sunset, you're feeding your stomach only. And so in these moments, you want that consciousness to elevate itself and to then say, if all of these things happen potentially, and the only thing that I have to do is for the time the sun is up, engage in this practice, why would I stop doing it? Some of us feel this way because you didn't wake up for suhoor this morning. You didn't drink even the sip of water that the Prophet says there's barakah in it. So you can enhance the exercise. Right? If I'm running on the treadmill, the first time I didn't stretch, I just ate like a bucket of ice cream before I got on this thing, whatever else. That was a great laugh, thank you. Yeah, it makes me feel amazing about myself. Yeah. But you start to reflect deeply, like, hey, how do I get more out of this as a practice? Does anybody else have any thoughts, takeaways? I want to read a couple of things. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying that the physical hunger is a nice physical reminder of staying away from bad deeds and trying to do more good deeds, especially this one in the summer, which is even harder. I think if you're not going fasting, usually do on Monday, Thursday, all of a sudden fasting today, I think it was a very solid reminder. And also another thing that I think you mentioned was I think the children of Israel, when they escaped from Pharaoh, I think they fasted because it brought them humility rather than seeing themselves as the children of they have a miracle. They were shown humility by fasting. We kind of connect with those oppressed people throughout history. Those are the two things.
Yeah, and fasting is for everybody, whether they're wealthy or in poverty, regardless of the part of the world that they're in. But it doesn't mean that I can't take certain things from it for myself uniquely. And you start to deepen in the phase of life you're in. Can you imagine what it's like to live in this heat when you have nothing to eat or drink? And sometimes the only way that I can relate to people who are not in the same space of existence as I am is by purposely putting myself in a place that I remember, hey, this is all voluntary for me at the end of the day. I'm a grown man. I could go into my office and close the door, and I could eat whatever I want to. None of you would be able to say anything to me. I could sit here and eat in front of you right now. Who's going to say something to me? But the recognition is that sometimes our practice and ritual isn't just about ourselves as such, but is a mechanism to connect to others. And through that connection to others, it actually deepens being about ourselves in the best of ways. Because do you want to have a heart that is so much now rooted in a place where it is oppressed by the tyrannical nafs that's in you, that it's not even acutely aware or thinking of the fact that when it is hot and humid and crazy in the middle of Manhattan, where when the sun is up and the buildings are so high, one side of the street might have shade, but the other side does not. That there's more cops than anybody needs roaming the streets, but they have nothing better to do than bother the homeless people that are sleeping in the air-conditioned trains. that of all the things that they have capacity to do, they're going to chase after and arrest the people who jump over a turnstile that don't even have $2.75 to pay their fare. And Allah gives you the gift of fasting that allows for you to become more acutely aware through consciousness, taqwa. What is the point of you being Muslim in this world? Was it so that you could come to a room and have no doubt that there was going to be food on your plate at sunset? And then walk away not feeling joy at that reality? Do you get what I mean? I want to read to you some quotes from Ali radiallahu anhu. If you're at Jummah last week, we talked about the tragedy of Karbala. Tomorrow at the halaqa before, we'll get into it a little bit more. And I don't know what I'm going to talk about at Jummah tomorrow, but probably something relevant. But I want you to think about what these words give you in terms of perspective. There's nobody who's going to tell you that Ali radiallahu anh is not a good Muslim. There's nobody who can say he was just a Muslim in name. He is a Muslim in reality. The consequence of engaging in these spiritual exercises, not devoid of an understanding of how religion, ethics, and spirituality all synergize under the banner of Islam. They don't live separate or compartmentalized, but they have a relationship together. And when you are Muslim everywhere, in your home, outside of your home, in the workplace, outside of the workplace, with people who they could do something to you, or people who have no capacity to do anything to you at all, you have consistency. You have the same consciousness and wakefulness. It impacts how you see the world. It influences perspective. These are quotes that are taken from a text that's called Hilyat al-Awliya. And you can find it in English, you could get the PDF. It's just depictions and descriptions of companions of the prophets, their sayings, the Khulafa Rashidun, great spiritual masters of our tradition. You should read it. It's a good book that is filled with quotes, but don't read it in the sense of entertainment. Read it in the sense of education. These are how these people saw the world. And the argument that I'm making is that fasting, as well as these other rituals, will influence, more importantly, and transform what's inward so that we see the world differently. And so I want you to just think about it in terms of some of these sayings that Ali radiallahu anh has attributed to him, the father of Hussein radiallahu anh, who is martyred on the plains of Karbala. And so Ali radiallahu anh, he says that the most sincere of people in their actions and the most knowledgeable of Allah are those who are strongest in their love and awe for the sanctity of the people of La ilaha illallah. The most sincere of people in their actions and the most knowledgeable of Allah are those who are strongest in their love and awe for the sanctity of the people of La ilaha illallah. Which doesn't mean that they're just in awe of Muslims, but they're in awe of people who are not living by any other standard other than there's nothing worthy of my worship and subservience other than God. That I take as exemplars those who know what they are meant to be an abd of. You're not supposed to be an abd, a servant of wealth. You're not meant to be somebody who chases after something that can never be satiated. The son of Adam is given a mountain of gold, he seeks another mountain of gold. And you could say there's greed there and all kinds of things. There's also the possibility that the first mountain of gold didn't give me the contentment I thought it would. Maybe I need more to actually be happy. Or maybe it's not where happiness actually comes from. But I can see this person who's liberated by choosing to be a servant of the divine. They're not stuck in the dunya. They don't seek validation from individuals who only accept them when they become that which they are not. They don't have to mistreat somebody to feel good about themselves. But they have contentment. They have balance. The people who understand that there is nothing worthy of worship except Allah, and embedded in that is they knew who their God is. In your religion, Allah tells you in the very first page that He is Rahman and Rahim. That's how He introduces Himself to you. Not a God that just watches you, but watches over you. And Ali radiallahu anh, he says that the most sincere of people in their actions and most knowledgeable of Allah are those who are strongest in their love and awe for the sanctity of the people of La ilaha illallah. I want to look up to people who are actual worshippers of the divine, not worshippers of physical beauty, who will die 1,000 times over every time they look in a mirror as they age. Not worshippers of validation of an anti-black society that teaches me that whiteness should be my aspiration as the primordial state of existence. But the true fitri state is one that transcends these reductive, simplistic mindsets. Ali radiallahu anh, he says that goodness does not consist in having much property and children, but in doing many good deeds, increasing your gentle character, and adorning yourself before people with the worship of your Lord. Then if you do well, glorify Allah. If you do ill, ask forgiveness of Him. There is no good in the world except for two types of people: someone who sins and then follows up with repentance, and someone who races to do good deeds. What is done in God-wariness is never little, and how can something be little if accepted by Allah? How do you get to this place of seeing the world in this way? Where you can see beauty in the one that actually makes mistakes and sins. When you can see the benefit in all people around you, that everyone has husn to them. In another saying, he says, remember 5 instructions from me, in following which you shall sooner exhaust your camels than run out of their benefits. Let no servant hope for anything except from his Lord. Let him not fear anything except his own sin. Let no ignorant person feel ashamed to ask about what he knows not. Let no knowledgeable person, if asked about what he knows not, feel ashamed to say, Allah knows best. And patience is in relation to belief, like the head to the body. One who has no belief, if he has no patience. In another saying, he says, what I fear most is the hankering after idle desires and long hopes. The former blocks one from the truth, and the latter causes forgetfulness of the hereafter. In truth, the world has gone its way out. In truth, the hereafter has come journeying to us, and each of the two has its own sons. Therefore, be a son of the hereafter, and do not be a son of the world. Today there are deeds without accounts, and tomorrow accounts without deeds. In another saying, he says, I've seen a remnant of the companions of Allah's Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I see no one that resembles them. By Allah, they used to rise in the morning, disheveled, dust-covered, pale, with something between their eyes like goats' knees. As they had spent the night chanting Allah's book, turning from their feet to their foreheads. If Allah was mentioned, they swayed the way trees sway on a windy day. Then their eyes poured out in tears until by Allah they soaked their clothes. By Allah, it is as if today folks sleep in indifference. He said in another saying of his, blessed is the servant that cries constantly to Allah. who has known people while they have not known him, and Allah has marked him with his contentment. These are the true beacons of guidance. Allah repels from them every wrongful dissension, and shall enter them into his own mercy. They are not the wasteful tale-bearers, nor the ill-mannered self-displayers. And he says in another narration of his, the real faqih is he who does not push people to despair from Allah's mercy, nor lulls them into a false sense of safety from his punishment, nor gives them licenses to disobey Allah, nor leaves the Quran for something else. There is no good in worship devoid of knowledge, nor in knowledge devoid of understanding, nor in inattentive recitation. This is comparable to Hasan al-Basri's own definition. Have you ever seen a faqih? The faqih is he who has renounced the world, longs for the hereafter, possesses insight in his religion, and worships his Lord without cease. In another narration of his, is saying Ali radiallahu anh, he says, be wellsprings of the science and beacons in the night, wearing old clothes, but possessing new hearts, for which you shall be known in the heavens and remembered on the earth. He says in another saying, this world lasts for only an hour. Spend it in obedience. In another saying, he says, thus does knowledge die, when those who possess it die. By Allah, I do swear it. The earth will never be empty of one who establishes the proofs of Allah so that his proofs and signs never cease. They are the fewest in number, but the greatest in rank before Allah. Through them, Allah preserves his proofs until they bequeath it to those like them and plant it firmly in their hearts. By them, knowledge has taken by assault the reality of things, so that they found easy what those given to comfort found hard, and found intimacy in what the ignorant found desolate. They accompanied the world with bodies whose spirits were attached to the highest regard. How one yearns to see them. Then Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anh, he says, the compassionate, al-Hanan, is he who comes to the one who shunned him. The granter of favor, al-Manan, is he who extends the favor before he asked for it. This is the father of Al-Hussein radiallahu anh, who is martyred on the 10th day of Muharram at the plains of Karbala. He grows up and is reared, socialized, and nurtured with teachings like this and that much more. In a place where ritual isn't seen as an ends but a means to something. You are experiencing right now and tasting in these last minutes before the sun sets, what is the meaning of this fast? Not when it's easy, but when it's most difficult, giving you a sense of all things that you can reflect and contemplate upon. And this is what becomes a gateway to being able to see the world in the ways that these people saw it as. Not as something you have to reject, but in recognizing its proportionality to the world beyond this one. So you want to utilize this day to gain insight into yourself. Because the paradoxical nature of the self is that you can only learn about the self through the self. You can't learn about you through me, you can only learn about you through you. You want to celebrate achievement. When you make dua at the end of your prayer today, sit with a known that you have a lot of food that's going to be there, that you could probably get seconds and thirds if you wanted to. So there's no rush. We'll make sure that somebody before you doesn't eat all of it. Just thank Allah that He gave you the capacity and the tawfiq to fast on this day, or put into your heart the desire to want to fast if you weren't able to fast today. Thank Allah for the gift of being able to break your fast or to share a meal with people who understand what your life experiences are like, as many of you are quite often the only Muslim in a lot of the spaces you frequent during the course of the day. Thank Allah for so much of what it is that He's given to you, that a simple drink of water and the true taste of its refreshing nature at a day's end filled with heat and sweat and perspiration and exhaustion and tiredness is not meant to be the last thought of reflection, but the gateway to reflection to say, if this is how grateful I am for just a sip of water, how am I by seeing all of the other blessings that are in my life? And to allow for it to be an opening to real contentment, to real blessing, to real inward balance, that as you move forward in pursuit of what so many before us who were illustrious in their luminosity stood on, that wasn't just about outwards or externals, but inward states that compelled the body to live in pursuit of something that was just bigger than momentary satisfaction. Wallahu ta'ala alam wa billahi tawfiq. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.